Okay, so we're going to get started today with the second to last lecture. I'm picking this as one of the two lectures that I'm going to go through because this is what I got the request from 220 saying this is an important thing for you guys to know. I also subsequently talked to a few people at Berkeley who have moved on from DVC, and they said that this was one of the more valuable things that they learned as well. So it's one of those things to definitely figure out how to master. It's unfortunate because of the way the semester worked out, we don't have more time to practice this, but all the taking plans and then we're going to do elevations, and I think I'm going to do a section next class. But whatever the ones are that I don't do, like a plan, I know I'm not going to do a plan, you can go back and review that one on your own just to see what I did. It's similar to taking a section, you're just doing it in plan view instead of in section view. So today we're going to work through and create some elevations from our Rhino model. And to me, this is one of the more important things that you guys can learn and master, because if you spend all this time building a great 3D model, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to get good, high quality, scalable, to scale elevations out of it. And it's a pretty quick process once you have the model built to create these elevations and or to update them as you go forward. So I'm going to walk you through it. There is a step-by-step of what I'm doing today, which is why I didn't give you a handout. Well, there's kind of two reasons I didn't give you a handout. One, none of you follow the handout anyway. And two, you can just follow this step-by-step and you'll get to where I'm going today anyway. So we're gonna create these elevations from Rhino. You can get to this assembly 10.8 tutorial by going to tutorials, going to assemblies, and then coming down to 10.8. You'll see that I also have write-ups for plans and sections so that you can do both of those as well. So we're on 10.8 elevations from Rhino, and essentially this is going to walk you through all of the steps that I'm going to be working through today. It's possible that I'll do them slightly out of order when I do them in lecture. I don't always do them in exactly the same order, but all will still be there. Okay, so I went ahead and I opened up my master site file that has my building in it, and I need to think first about which elevation I'm going to take, or which elevation view I'm going to take. And in my case, the elevation view that is best is certainly this side elevation. I could take the end elevation here and do that, but it's not as exciting, so I'm not going to do that one. I'll do the face of the elevation. Obviously, the back elevation or the rear elevation is not particularly useful either, so this really is the right elevation. So for a lot of you that have worked with orthogonal views, it's as easy as switching into one of your standard views. If I went to set view and I went to, let's say, the front view, I should have selected my object first. And sometimes we need to go into wireframe mode to see it. There it is. Zoom selected. There's my view. But for me, my view is my building is on an angle, so it doesn't really work. So because of that, I need to set up a plane so that I can orient myself to a surface. So let me switch back into my perspective view. And the good news for you guys is, in my case, I'm going to have to do this. So if you have your building off axis, you'll be able to kind of follow along here. So I have my building right there. I'm going to switch for a second back into the shaded mode. I'll be jumping back and forth between those. And when I go to my view, I'm going to click the little triangle next to where it says perspective, and I'm going to go down to set camera, and I'm going to choose the orient camera to surface. And so when I click orient camera to surface, I'm going to look at the command line, and it says select surface to orient camera to. I'm not sure if it's going to let me do this based on my block or not. We'll find out. I will pick this block is the surface there. No, it didn't let me do it. So in that scenario, let me just create a quick surface that I can work with. So I'm just going to turn on my object snap here, and I can snap to the end point and the end point, and we'll go, why is it not vertical? Let me reset my C-plane here to world top. And we'll go there to there. And there's a nice surface for me to work with. And so that surface will let me orient the camera correctly. I was hoping I could just do it off the block file, but I won't be able to, so that will help. So I'm going to go ahead right here and go to Set Camera, Orient Camera to Surface. And it's going to say Select Surface to Orient Camera to. I'm going to, I hope, pick that surface. There we go. It says Select Point on Surface. And so this is a little bit counterintuitive. You guys can see that little arrow that points out. You would think that you'd want the arrow pointing the other direction because it would be the view that you were in. But for whatever reason, Rhino wants the arrow pointing to the camera. So this is actually the correct orientation. And when I click somewhere on this surface, it's going to reorient my view to be looking straight at that surface. So even though I couldn't use one of the standard views, it's actually fairly simple to get myself into a standard view. Unfortunately, my projection style right now is still in perspective. So it's very small, but you can see up here there's a little bit of a 1-point perspective to a vanishing point right here. I want to, with nothing selected, go into my properties and change the projection type from perspective into parallel. And when I do that, everything disappears. Don't panic. I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to go back into wireframe mode, and it's still there. What happened when I switched into my parallel projection is it caused me to look through a mountain that was way behind at my building. And so I'm going to have to deal with that later on. And we'll get to that in just a second. But before I get too far in here, I'm going to orient my view a little bit. I'm going to use the pan tool. I don't use pan very often, but I'm going to use the pan tool here to set up my view so that I have a nice kind of composition and setup for my elevation view. Something like that looks pretty good. I might zoom in a little bit more so that I get a little bit more of my drawing. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I'm not overly, I have a long wall there, but I'm okay if that's cut a little bit. It's probably right about there is a nice elevation view for my eventual use. At this point, I'm going to go up to my little triangle, my drop down where it says perspective. I'll click on that triangle. I'm going to come down to Set View, and I'm going to go to Named Views, and I'm going to call this Elevation 1. It's very important that you save this view so that you can come back to it. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the Elevation 1 name so that I can make that one so that I'm not seeing it. And then I'm going to actually start doing a lot of my work in one of the other views. I currently have the perspective view showing here. If you have top, front, and right side, take one of the top, front, or right side and switch it into the perspective view by going to Set View and then going to, you could just do perspective so that you can actually move around and orbit and work with this file a little bit. So I'm going to be working in this view and in the Elevation 1 view kind of simultaneously. And that's something you have to get used to when you start to do these sorts of drawings. So a couple things that I need to take care of. One, as I look at this, remember I told you that I'm looking through one of these mountains way back here somewhere. Well, in my case, this is on the shoulder of this mountain here. So all of that terrain that I had, this terrain way out here, I don't really need it. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn that off. And when I turn off the site information here, I'm going to leave the site information off and turn off the terrain. That's better. And I may have to turn off the other blocks of Tahoe terrain. Hold on a second. I have to sort out which one I still need on. That's the one I still need on. Like that. And now if I were to come back to this Elevation 1 view and switch to Shaded View, I'm still not seeing it. That's annoying. Is this backwards? No, that's the correct orientation. So, turns out that I am still looking through this side of the mountain. So I need to make some modifications. I'm going to go ahead and create a large vertical plane here. And it doesn't even really matter that it's perfectly straight. I just need to make sure that it intersects this. Let's go back to shaded so you can see it intersect. and I will move this a little bit closer to my building. Like that, and then I'll move vertically and we'll drop it down. This is just so that it goes all the way through my building. Now, I'm about to explode this block. That always makes me nervous, so I'll go ahead and go to File. I'll save it, and then I'll do a Save As. And we'll add dash elevation. There we go. OK, so let me take these two pieces, like that. We're going to explode, so they're outside of being a block. OK, they're not. And I'll go ahead and do a split of those with this big surface. All right, so these are all on this side of the drawing. If I hide these, and/or I hide this surface, now I can see my elevation. So essentially, the stuff that's behind that I was looking through, I split it off and I hid it so that I'm not seeing it anymore. And now my elevation view looks like it should. That's OK. That's part of the process, something to get used to. So I still have the elevation view showing here, and I can still see it in the perspective view right there. I'm going to go ahead and on the elevation view, I'm going to click the little triangle here. I'm going to go down to Set Camera, and I'm going to click on Show Camera. And nothing changes in the elevation 1 view. Nothing at all. However, when I go and look at the perspective view, I get this really giant camera thing that is represented of what I'm seeing here. And so what I need to do in order to identify what this view is I need to find the end of the camera. And sometimes it's convenient, sometimes it's really close to your drawing. In this case, it's way past my drawing. I'm going to zoom selected, I hope. Oh, come on. Conveniently way too far away for me. Give me a second here. It's so far away that it doesn't want to let me do anything. So I'm just going to create something to zoom to. There we go. Zoom selected. There we go. Now I can see the target of the camera. That can go away. Once I've seen the target of the camera, and the controls of the camera, I can create a rectangle, and I'm going to do that right here, rectangle corner to corner, from the middle point, and I have my point snap on, from this point there to, sorry, I have to do it as a vertical rectangle. It is this one, rectangle 3 points, and I have to go from this point to that point and down to this point, creating that rectangle. This rectangle is only a quarter of the size of the overall view, so I'm going to scale it from this upper corner by 2 to get to the full size of the view. Once I've created that, if you look very carefully at the border of this view, you can see just a hint of yellow going around the outside. This little yellow line is representative of the view that I'm seeing in elevation 1. And it's important to create that little border because we're ultimately going to create a line drawing of this view. And that's what comes next. I'm going to use a command called Make 2D. And if I'm being honest, I think this is one of the coolest commands that is in Rhino. It's very underused, but it's awesome. And what Make 2D does is it takes any view, doesn't have to be an elevation view, it could be perspective view, and it makes that a line drawing, a live line, like you could bring it into AutoCAD or Illustrator and mess with the lines as if it were a flat drawing. So any 3D view, you can make a drawing. So I'm going to do that with the elevation 1 view to create my line drawing of this particular elevation. So I'm going to go ahead and type Make 2D. I have nothing selected right now. And it says Select Objects to Draw. I'm going to go ahead and type All. And that selects all of my objects. Press Enter when done. Enter. It gives me some options, 2D drawing options. The layout, do I want it to be the current view? Yes, I do. Do I want to show my tangent lines? Yes. Do I want to show hidden lines? Yes. I like to do both of those. Now here's a question that sometimes is a good thing and sometimes is a bad thing. Maintaining source layers. If I check the box to maintain source layers, eventually when I move over into Illustrator, I'll have everything on a separate layer. So the walls, if I had the walls on a separate layer, the walls will be on a separate layer. If I had the furniture on a separate layer, that'll be on a separate layer. If basically anything that I have on a layer will show up as a separate layer. If you have 150 layers and you bring that into Illustrator, it's a bit daunting. That's a lot of layers in Illustrator to manage. If, on the other hand, I don't check this box and I don't maintain the source layers, when I go and bring it into Illustrator, I'll have a layer for visible lines, a layer for hidden lines, and or a layer for tangent lines, and that's it. So I won't have very many layers at all. And if I want to change line weights or make something thicker, it makes it more difficult. So for my purposes, I am going to check to maintain source layers. It's a little bit challenging to decide to do that, but that's what I'm going to try to do. Then down here, it's going to tell you what layers it's going to make. The main layer is going to be called Make 2D, and then it's going to be visible lines and tangents, etc. So all of that is just fine. And at this point, I'll go ahead and say OK. And we'll let it do its thing. It can take a little while. If you run into trouble at this point, when you're trying to do the Make 2D, try turning off your furniture or any complicated objects that aren't really necessary. I probably should have done that, but I didn't. Because it'll have to go through and calculate out the hidden lines of your furniture. You have a couch and you have lines behind the couch. It'll figure out what's hidden from view, etc. So it can get a little daunting while it works. So I'm going to let this run for a bit while it's running. And I'll go ahead and I'll pause the recording and then I'll start again so you don't have to sit here and watch me while this runs. OK, so it finished its Make 2D. So the place that I'm going to see the Make 2D drawing is actually going to be in the top view. So I'll switch to the top view right now. I'm going to type Z for zoom, followed by S for selected. And I can see what it created. If I zoom into that little box that I was so carefully constructed, everything inside of the box is the part that matters. Everything outside of the box is stuff that doesn't matter. So I'll go ahead and come in here. I'll take my box, and I'll type trim. And I'm just going to get rid of the stuff that goes outside of my box, because all of that stuff doesn't matter. There we go. And then I will take this, the stuff that's in the box, that's the part that matters, and I'm going to move it from this corner to 0.000. And in order for the Illustrator export to work, we have to move it to 0.000. Then I will type Z for zoom, followed by S for selected, and there it is. It overlaps my drawing, and it's kind of messy, but this is now ready to do the export. So I'm going to go to File, and then Export Selected. And I'm going to change my Save As type into Adobe Illustrator. You could, if you're more comfortable in AutoCAD, you could absolutely do this. You could bring it into AutoCAD and work on it in AutoCAD. It's for the purposes of this, I think it's easiest to do it in Illustrator, but I just want you to be aware that you could write an AutoCAD file from this if you wanted to. And so I'll give it a name and give it where it's going to be saved. So hold on a second. What are we on today? This is 226, right? Is that right? Or is my numbering might be wrong? Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. So let's get a folder. This is fall of 2018. And this is elevation. And then I'm going to click on the Options button. And these options become really important. I want to preserve the model scale. And by this, I don't want it to be 1:1 anymore. This is where I'm actually going to do the scaling. If I wanted this to be 1/4 inch equals a foot, for example, my inches here would be 48 inches are equal to 1 inch. I have this, by the way, if you get a little bit stuck, I have this right here so that you won't forget what it is. That's at 1/4 inch equals a foot. If you wanted to be 1/8 inch equals a foot, it would be 92 to 1. And you can do the math to kind of figure it out. But 48 to 1 will work. So there it is, 48 to 1. And the rest of this is fine, the color mode, etc. So I'll go ahead and say OK. And then I'll go ahead and save this. and it presents the options one more time. I'll say OK. And now I'll go ahead and open that over in Adobe Illustrator. So let me open up Illustrator. And once Illustrator's open, I'll go to File and then Open. And I'll go ahead and click on Open. So when it comes into Illustrator, I'm going to press Control minus, and then I'll hold down Spacebar and drag over so that I can see this a little bit better. We can see that my drawing has come in, but the piece of paper is not the correct size for this particular drawing. So I'll use my Artboard tool, which is on the left side here, right there. And I'm going to adjust the artboard to match the borders of the viewport that I just exported. So sometimes you have to kind of move it away, and then it'll snap to the corners of the viewport. Make it a little smaller. There we go. Like that and like that. And so the result is that I have my drawing kind of set up. That's a flat drawing of this elevation. It's not quite right yet. There's a few problems. One of the major problems is that my layers haven't been really identified. I've got a few extra lines that need some cleanup. Let me go ahead and look at my layers for a second. And this is where I was warning you that it's a bit of a mess when it comes in. And so me being fairly comfortable in Illustrator, I'm OK with this being a giant mess. If you've never worked in Illustrator before, or you're not very comfortable, you might want to keep that maintain source layers unchecked, and then go through and you can manually deal with it from there. What I will do to kind of organize this, though, is I'm going to create two layers right here. One will be called Visible, and the other will be called Hidden. And I'll make sure that the visible is on top of the hidden. And then I'm going to scan through this list of layers. We can make it a little bigger to see. And I'm going to take all of the hiddens, for example. I'm holding down, oops, I'm going to hold down Control, and I'll select all of the hiddens. There you go. I have all the hidden selected, and I'm going to put all of those onto the hidden layer, which then lets me collapse all the hiddens. Then I'll take all of the rest of these that are all visible, and I'll put them up on the visible layer. That just helps organize things quite a bit. So I'm going to turn off to start the hidden layers altogether, and I'm going to work with just the visible layers. At this point with the visible layers, I want to select them and start to adjust their line weights. If I were to zoom in here a little bit, you can see what I'm looking at. This is all the stuff that is that are my line weights. The walls, for example, these ones, and I can see over here, if I look carefully, there's the exterior walls layer. I want to select all of those objects. I can click right next to this layer there to select all the objects that are on that layer. Then I can go to Properties, and I can say, you know what, I want my stroke color to be black. Let me change that color. Oops. Come on, there we go. I want that color to be black. And I want there to be no fill. And I could adjust my line weight here, so I could make all of those 2 points, for example, so they're a little bit thicker. I don't know that that's necessarily the right strategy at this point. And then I had these blue lines here that needed to be adjusted. The other option would be to select by color. So instead of selecting the ones that are all blue, this way, I could go up to the select menu and say select same fill color, or excuse me, stroke color, and that would select all the blue lines in this case. And I'll convert those over to black. I don't have any swatches, that's why it keeps making me go over here. And those could be black, etc. By default, what I typically do to make this look better is I select everything, all of my lines, and I come over into my properties and I change all of the strokes to be about 0.25, so they're really small and thin. I start with that, and then I say, okay, well, what should be thicker on this particular drawing? By the way, I didn't delete that square that I oriented my camera view to, so it's right here in the way. So just something to be aware of. Make sure you get rid of that before you do it. And so essentially what I'd say is the things that go around the outside of my building are probably something that needs to be a little bit thicker. And I could manually go in and change the first one. We'll go back up to 1 point. Nope. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. 0.25. And then I could go in and select all of these that are going around my building and adjust them to be a little bit thicker. This takes some time and some effort, but you can really get through and make your line weights look awfully good. For your purposes, I'm not going to make you sit and watch me make those adjustments, so we'll leave it all at kind of a general line thickness. There's a few things to get rid of, like this big line can go away. This line here can go away. So there's always a little bit of cleanup to do. This line here can go away. This line can go away. That line can go away. That line there can go away. This line there can go away. This one really should extend down a little bit more. Maybe like that. That line there should get a little bit shorter. This line should meet up right on top of it. Yeah, that's pretty good. There's a little line there that needs to go away. So the point is there's some cleanup. That can go away too. Now I want to spend some time with the hidden lines. So I'll come over here and I'll close the visible lines. I'll turn back on the hidden lines and I'll select them all. Sorry. I'll lock the visible lines. I'm going to select all the hidden lines. They're currently white, and that's a problem. So once I select all of the hidden lines, I'm going to come into my properties. I'm going to go to my stroke, and I'm going to change all of those to be kind of a medium gray, maybe something like that. And suddenly you'll see all the hidden lines. Then I'm going to go to my, I'm going to open up my stroke window here. If I can find it, there it is, stroke. And I want to show all of my options because I'm going to make all of these dashed lines. So I'm going to turn on dashed line and I'm going to say, let's do a dash of maybe 2 points and a gap of maybe 1 point to make those a little bit finer. And then when I click off, you guys will be able to see that I have lots of hidden lines. Doesn't quite look right. They're a little bit too thick. I'll select all of them again, and I'll go into my weight here, and we'll make them 0.25 so they're nice and thin. And suddenly they look a lot better, except you guys can't see them. So we'll try that one more time, make them a little bit thicker so maybe you can see them. And maybe it's a 2 and a 2. The gaps are a little bit bigger. Can you see them? No. This is so hard because on my screen I can see them just fine. Let's try that one more time. 0.5. Now you can see them a little bit better. So truth is, I don't think I would have them that. I would have them a little bit lighter. But you're really quickly being able to see all of the interior stuff that's been hidden, which is nice. You can see here like the couch that I had with all the hidden lines. It's probably too much. We could probably get rid of it. I could turn off my artwork if I didn't want to see that. A lot of these diagonals really should just go away. Those are holdovers from the terrain. And so I could go through and I could delete them. That one there could go away too. This could go away. And so you could spend some time really cleaning this up. I'm not going to do the cleanup. I'm going to leave this the way it is so that you guys can see it. And then the thing that will take this kind of a little bit further is I want to go back and create a black and white rendering with some shadow that I can put behind this line drawing, so I get a little bit more depth out of my elevation. So I'm going to jump back over into Rhino right here. And in my elevation 1 layer, I want to perform a render. I could do the full render with the sun and everything, but that would be full color. And I really would like to have something that's a little bit more of just a black and white, or what is called a clay render. And so if we jump over here into the tutorial here, you can see right here I have a special breakout for the clay rendering, which creates this black and white shadowed version of it. And so that's essentially what well, the link doesn't work, but that's what we're supposed to go to. It's V-Ray 8.29, which should be here. There it is. And so this will walk you through how to make a clay rendering. In my infinite wisdom, I decided that it would be nice for you guys to have a easy way of doing it. So you note right at the top, instead of following all my steps, you can also just download the VisOpt file that loads all the settings for you. Convenient, right? So we'll right-click and we'll say Save Link As, and we can save it into today's folder. And let's put it right here, and I'll go ahead and we can save it right there. And I can jump back over into Rhino. I can open my V-Ray options, and just as we've been doing, I can go ahead and I can load that VisOpt file. And I don't think I called it a VisOpt, so hold on a second. Let me jump back over. Save link as. I need to say .visopt. There we go. Failed, no file. Let's try this one. Yep, that time it'll work. This also, by the way, is available under Resources. You can go to the Quick Rendering Setups. And if you scroll down here far enough, you'll get to the clay rendering setups. So you can download it right from here as well. And I'm making sure that this one works. Yep. So you can do it right from there. OK, so I'm going to jump back over into my Rhino file here. This was the most recent one from the V-Ray setups. So I'll pick that one, and I'll click Open. And now it's loaded up all of the settings for my material. So one thing I do want to check is under my global switches, the way that this is working is that I'm overriding all the materials with a gray. So every material that's in here is going to be overridden with gray, which means transparency is going to go away, which is fine, because what I ultimately want is a render of this view without anything on it. So let me go ahead and go to V-Ray, and let me go into my options. I forget the size, so let's go to Output. I want my view aspect to exactly match what I created my Make 2D from. So I'm going to uncheck the lock, the L, click on the Get View Aspect so it's exact, re-click the L, and I'll do a small version to see first, then ultimately I'm going to do a bigger version, and we'll go ahead and render this. You probably don't need your, so there it is. This is showing the lights that are lighting up my scene. I should have turned on the sun. There we go. And then let me go ahead and re-render it. There we go, a little bit better. And so what I'm getting here is I'm getting the shadows as they're being cast on my building. Like that. I'm getting shadows for all the windows, etc. I'm getting shadows cast on the ground here. This happens to be an open door, so I'm seeing inside to the stairwell. That's what I'm seeing through that. That's why it's a little bit darker. So once I've verified that this looks pretty good as the clay rendering that I want, I'm going to up the size and the resolution by quite a bit. And that's so that when you go to print it someday, when it's big, you have a good size background. So we'll pick one of the larger sizes here, maybe a little bit taller than that. We'll go maybe 1500, like that, and we'll go ahead and render. And again, you don't have to use the distributed rendering because you can tell that this renders pretty darn fast because we got rid of all the materials. So I'll let this chug its way through. And once again, I didn't delete that piece. I really should have deleted that piece. Right there. That was my mistake. We'll try it one more time. So that goes away. There you go. So that just finished. I'll go ahead and I will save this. I only need the image itself. I don't need any of the rest of the files with it. So let me go ahead and put it in the same place on my flash drive. And we'll call this clay rendering. And we'll go ahead and save that. And so now that I have that, I can switch over into Illustrator, and I can bring that in. I'm going to go to the File menu and choose Place. And there is my clay rendering elevation, and I'll go ahead and place it in to my scene. It shows up a lot bigger than my drawing. That's OK. I'm going to line up one corner right there. If I can do it correctly. There we go. And then I will scale this down by holding down the Shift key right there until this lines up with the rest of my artboard. So the advantage of making those match up is now I don't have to spend time scaling my drawing to get, sorry, I think I'm over by 1 pixel, like that. I may have to correct it just a little bit, but I don't have to spend too much time getting the shadows to fall where they're supposed to fall as part of my line drawing. Does that kind of make sense for how I created this? So it's a quick and easy way, and I apologize, you guys can't see it quite as well as I can see it on here, it's a quick and easy way of getting a pretty decent looking elevation out of your building without too much work. I mean, so far I'm in this, and obviously I've done it more than you, but I'm in it 40 minutes, and I have a reasonable elevation of my building because I spent a lot of time modeling in 3D. And so that's the idea. If you can get quick at producing these, you can make changes and very quickly update and have a nice building elevation. And I apologize that you can't, it's amazing the difference on, it's like I should turn this around so you guys can see. It's almost looking at something completely different. They won't let me. But yeah, if you guys want to come see. It's hard, the projector.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a lot different when you see the projector version versus what it really does look like. So I apologize to make you all do this. So it's a pretty quick way of getting a pretty decent looking elevation. It's better. So I apologize. If you're watching the video, though, you'll see the correct version. So this, though, just in terms of food for thought, this particular version is has a little bit of a yellow tint to it. So if I really wanted this to be a true black and white version, I could take this same view, take the image behind, take it into Photoshop, make it truly black and white, bring it back in if you didn't want that. Yeah? That was when I did the export from Rhino to Illustrator. So when I said 48:1, that was 1/4 inch equals a foot. So if you wanted it to be 1/8 inch, basically whatever value it is, you have to be able to type in that particular scale when you do the export. So this drawing right here is actually a scale drawing that you could put up on a board and use a scale on and whatever. So it's a real drawing. It's not a Photoshop collage where you don't really know the scale. This is a real legitimate elevation drawing. And I think that's something that's really important distinction that you can get out of this process. So with a little bit more care in my line weights, I can improve this a lot more by going through. Remember, if you get a line weight that you like, let me unlock the visible and let me lock the hidden here for a second. If I take a line here and I adjust the line weight and I find that, you know what, I really like it at 1 point. Let me zoom in here a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. Like that, if I really like this at 1 point, I can use the eyedropper to copy from one to the other. So I can pick up this and I can apply it to some other line. So you can work through your drawing that way. It's kind of like a match prop in AutoCAD. So this is the elevation that I want you guys to be able to create. It is required that for the final that you do one view. And so we're going to do the elevation today, and honestly, I forget what I'm going to do on Monday. I'm going to do one of the other views, so you can get a line drawing of one of the other views. I think I'll probably do a section. You then will need to turn in either this elevation view, or if I do a section on Monday, the section view. So one or the other is going to need to be part of your final. What? We did sectional perspectives, not sectional line drawings. So I don't know. Maybe I'll do the plan. I haven't decided yet. Okay? So it'll be either the sectional line drawing or the plan line drawing, one or the other. And if you guys have a strong feeling, tell me afterward, and maybe that'll sway which one I do. Anyway, they're essentially the same. A plan view is just a section cut horizontally instead of vertically. It's the same. So it doesn't matter which one. So the point is, though, if you guys create this elevation view today, you're basically done with that piece of your final. And so, yes, technically speaking, you can do whatever you want today and turn in something for today's exercise. However, I would encourage you, especially if your model's fairly done, to try to do this elevation view because this is something you can just turn in as part of your final. Okay? There are other things that I can do, and I have done in the past. I forget on the projector or on the tutorial here if I do the... Yeah, I did end up putting a background texture behind. It works in this view because the cliff hillside shows background versus foreground. In the view that I did, because I have a different site this semester, there is no background versus foreground. There's no hill line, so it doesn't really work as well. But if you wanted to make it a little bit more casual, you could spend some time and put a background texture behind this. But I'm not going to overemphasize that. It's just one of the other strategies to make your drawing not quite as crisp. You put a little texture behind. But really, the most valuable thing for me, if I were working on this, is just to spend a little bit more time working on my line weights and making sure the lines stand out really, really nicely. If you find in the final version, which this won't be the case up on the projector, but if you find in the final version that your image is just a little bit too dark, remember you can select your image. I think it accidentally ended up on a layer that was, let me create a new layer. For the image. There we go. That way it's not confused with the hidden layer. there we go. If I wanted to, I could take this and I could adjust the opacity down, which would make it not quite as strong. Sometimes that's advantageous too. And you'd have to decide how much shadow is the right amount of shadow versus the line drawing. And that can make a difference in the overall piece as well. So I just wanted to point out that that is an adjustment you can make that can make a difference in the look of the final version of this particular drawing. Okay, so because you guys have so much to do, I didn't want to talk for too long today. So I know I went rather fast through it, but I think you can rely pretty safely on the step-by-steps that I've walked through to create this. So if you got lost on a particular step, just go back. I tried to make it as obvious as possible for those of you that aren't that comfortable in Illustrator. The Illustrator steps, I'm being very clear about click right here, and that will select everything. Click right there, change this, change that to get to the end result. Okay? So it's all there, it's all written up. And I think you guys, as long as you follow along, will be able to create a pretty good elevation rather quickly. And I know that this is something that Anthony wanted you guys to know for 220. If you're in 220 right now, sorry, you're learning it now instead of later. But for those of you that haven't taken 220 yet and are going to be taking it, this is a really important skill to be able to get quick, easy elevations from your Rhino models. All right.